From running through the destroyed streets of Paris as bullets whizzed past, to unveiling top-secret atomic bomb blueprints, to unveiling a deadly ring of spies during America's fight for independence, these women proved to be the best in the world during their time as they brought down armies and raised nations from shambles. Who are the most effective female spies of all time? And how did they become masters of espionage? Join us in this thrilling episode where we unveil the 5 most mysterious female spies. The seductive Mata Hari. In 1917, with widespread mutinies in the spring, massive strikes across the country, and the Nivelle offensive that had failed, France was in chaos. The French government, facing the threat of collapse due to war fatigue, needed a saving grace, and they found it in the confines of blaming a single German spy for their woes. Mata Hari, with her high-profile case and exaggerated importance in the press, became the perfect scapegoat. After her divorce in 1899, Margaretha Gertrude Zell moved to Paris and began performing as a circus horse rider. By 1904, she had reinvented herself as Mata Hari, an exotic dancer. Promiscuous, flirtatious, and openly flaunting her body, Mata Hari captivated audiences and became an overnight sensation after her debut performance at the Musée Guimet on March 13, 1905. She soon became the longtime mistress of millionaire industrialist Émile Étienne Guimet, the founder of the museum. Mata Hari brought a carefree, provocative style to the stage, which earned her widespread acclaim. The highlight of her act was the dramatic shedding of her clothing, until she was left wearing only a jeweled breastplate and some ornaments on her arms and head. However, Mata Hari performed her final show on March 13, 1915. By this time, she had become a successful courtesan, known more for her sensuality and eroticism than for her beauty. She had relationships with high-ranking military officers, politicians, and influential figures from many countries. These liaisons frequently took her across international borders. Before World War I, she was seen as an artist and a free-spirited bohemian. As the war approached, she was increasingly viewed as a promiscuous woman and perhaps a dangerous seductress. During the war, the Netherlands remained neutral, allowing Mata Hari, as a Dutch citizen, to cross borders freely. To avoid battlefields, she traveled between France and the Netherlands via Spain and Britain, attracting attention due to her movements. During this period, she had a passionate romantic relationship with Captain Vadim Maslov, a 23-year-old Russian officer serving with the French, whom she called the love of her life. Maslov was part of the 50,000-strong Russian expeditionary force sent to the Western Front in the spring of 1916. In April 1917, Maslov was wounded during the ill-fated Nivelle offensive to capture the German-controlled Bremont mountain range. He lost sight in his left eye, which led Zell to request permission to visit her wounded lover at a hospital near the front lines. Normally, as a citizen of a neutral country, she would not be allowed near the front. However, agents from the French 12e Bureau told her she could see Maslov if she agreed to spy for France. Before the war, Zell, performing as Mata Hari, entertained Crown Prince Wilhelm, the eldest son of Kaiser Wilhelm II and a senior German general on the Western Front. The 12e Bureau believed she could seduce the Crown Prince to obtain military secrets. In reality, his involvement in military operations was minimal. German propaganda had falsely promoted him as a great warrior and a worthy successor to the Hohenzollern monarchs, who had made Prussia strong. In truth, the Crown Prince was a playboy known for womanizing, partying, and heavy drinking. Unaware that the Crown Prince had little to do with the actual running of Army Group Crown Prince or the Fifth Army, the 12e Bureau offered Zell 1 million francs to seduce him and gather valuable intelligence about German plans. The fact that the Crown Prince had never commanded a unit larger than a regiment before 1914, yet was supposedly commanding both an army and an army group, should have hinted that his role in German decision-making was mostly symbolic. Zell's contact at the 12e Bureau was Captain Georges Ledoux, who would later become one of her main accusers. In late 1916, Zell traveled to Madrid and met with German military attaché Major Arnold Kalle, asking him to arrange a meeting with Crown Prince Wilhelm. During this time, Zell allegedly offered to share French secrets with Germany in exchange for money. Later that year, while traveling from Spain aboard the steamship Zealandia, she was arrested when the ship stopped at the British port of Falmouth. Taken to London, the former dancer was interrogated by Sir Basil Thomson, Assistant Commissioner at New Scotland Yard, in charge of counter-espionage. In his 1922 book Queer People, Thomson recounted how she eventually admitted to working for the 12e Bureau. Initially detained at the Cannon Row police station, she was later released and stayed at the Savoy Hotel. A full transcript of the interview is in Britain's National Archives and was broadcast, with Mata Hari played by Eleanor Braun, on LBC in 1980. It is unclear if she lied during the interrogation to make herself seem more intriguing, or if the French authorities were indeed using her, but refused to acknowledge it to avoid embarrassment and international backlash. In January 1917, Major Kalle sent radio messages to Berlin about the useful activities of a German spy codenamed H-21, whose biography closely matched Zell's, making it obvious that H-21 was Mata Hari. The Deuxième Bureau intercepted these messages and identified H-21 as Mata Hari. The messages were in a code that German intelligence knew the French had already broken, suggesting they were designed to ensure Zell's arrest by the French. General Walter Nicolai, the chief intelligence officer of the German army, was frustrated that Mata Hari had provided no valuable intelligence, only Paris gossip about the sex lives of French politicians and generals. He decided to end her employment by exposing her as a German spy to the French authorities. To test if she was indeed a spy, the Second Bureau of the French War Ministry allowed Mata Hari to obtain the names of 6 Belgian agents. 5 were suspected of submitting fake information and working for the Germans, while the 6th was suspected of being a double agent for Germany and France. 2 weeks after Mata Hari left Paris for Madrid, the Germans executed the double agent, while the other 5 continued their operations. This development convinced the Second Bureau that Mata Hari had revealed the names to the Germans. On February 13, 1917, Mata Hari was arrested in her room at the Hotel Élysée Palace on the Champs-Élysées in Paris. She was tried on July 24th, accused of spying for Germany and causing the deaths of at least 50,000 soldiers. Although French and British intelligence suspected her of spying for Germany, they could not produce definite evidence against her. Captain Pierre Bouchardon, her principal interrogator, who later prosecuted her at trial, grilled her relentlessly. He established that much of the Mata Hari persona was invented. Far from being a Javanese princess, Zelle was Dutch, which he used to paint her as dubious and dishonest at her trial. Zelle admitted to Bouchardon that she had accepted 20,000 francs from a German diplomat and former lover as reimbursement for belongings taken by German authorities. Bouchardon claimed this was actually payment for spying for Germany. Meanwhile, Ledoux had been preparing a case against his former agent, casting all her activities in the worst possible light, and even tampering with evidence. Despite news reports claiming she confessed to spying for Germany, Mata Hari never made such an admission. Throughout her ordeal, she maintained that she was not a German spy. During her trial, Zelle passionately declared her allegiance to the Allies and professed her deep love for France, the country she had embraced as her own. On October 15, 1917, Zelle was executed by a firing squad of 12 French soldiers just before dawn, at the age of 41. According to British reporter Henry Wales, who witnessed the event, she faced her fate without being bound and refused a blindfold. Defiantly, she blew a kiss to the firing squad. Wales described her final moments, noting that after the shots were fired, slowly, inertly, she settled to her knees, her head up always, and without the slightest change of expression on her face. For a fraction of a second, it seemed she tottered there, on her knees, gazing directly at those who had taken her life. Then she fell backward, bending at the waist, with her legs doubled up beneath her. A non-commissioned officer then approached her body, pulled out his revolver, and fired a shot into her head to ensure she was dead. After her death, Mata Hari's body was not claimed by any family members and was used for medical study. Her embalmed head was kept in the Museum of Anatomy in Paris. In 2000, it was discovered that her head had disappeared, possibly as early as 1954 during the museum's relocation, according to curator Roger Sabin. Her head remains missing, and records from 1918 indicate that the museum also received the rest of her body, but none of the remains could later be accounted for. Agent Sonia. Ursula Kuczynski, also known as Ruth Werner, Ursula Burton, and Ursula Hamburger, was a German communist activist who served as a spy for the Soviet Union during the 1930s and 1940s, notably handling nuclear scientist Klaus Fuchs. Shortly after arriving in Shanghai with her husband, she was introduced to Richard Sorge, a Soviet intelligence agent posing as a journalist, by the American journalist Agnes Smedley. After meeting Sorge, Ursula began using the cover name Sonia. She ran a Russian spy network under Sorge's direction between 1930 and 1935. Drilled in Moscow in a 7-month training session, Sonia mastered various practical aspects of spycraft, including radio operator skills. She learned to build and operate a radio receiver and became exceptionally proficient in Morse code. From March to December 1934, she was based in Shenyang, Manchuria, and in 1937, the Soviets awarded her the Order of the Red Banner for her espionage work in China, granting her the rank of colonel in the Soviet military without ever wearing a uniform. Between autumn 1939 and December 1940, operating as agent Sonja Schultz, alongside her husband Rudolf Hamburger, she was stationed in Switzerland as one of the Red Three, which included Sandorado. Her duties included working as a specialist radio operator, applying technical skills acquired during her training in Moscow. She sent encrypted information to Moscow from her little house in Kau, situated 3 hours up into the mountains above Montreux. The codes she used have never been deciphered. Additionally, she collaborated with the Lucy spy ring and recruited agents to infiltrate Germany. After the Nazi takeover of Danzig, in the autumn of 1939, she also established a resistance group in the formerly free city. Sent by the GRU, she and her new husband relocated from Switzerland to England, where she would remain for the rest of the 1940s. They settled in North Oxford initially, but soon moved to a succession of nearby villages, starting with Glimpton and then Kidlington. In May 1945, they moved again to a larger house in the North Oxfordshire village of Great Rollright, where they stayed until 1950. They became fully integrated into the village community, with her parents, who frequently visited Oxfordshire even after the war ended, buried in the Great Rollright churchyard. In Oxfordshire, she and Erich Henschke worked on infiltrating German communist exiles into the U.S. intelligence agency. By autumn 1944, they had succeeded in penetrating the UK activities of the U.S. intelligence service. During this time, the Americans were preparing Operation Hammer to parachute UK-based German exiles into Germany. Ursula Burton ensured that a substantial number of these OSS agents were reliable communists, capable of providing valuable intelligence from inside the Third Reich, not only to the U.S. military in Washington, but also to Moscow. From 19 to 43, she also served as a courier for the USSR's atomic spies, including Klaus Fuchs and Melita Norwood. Agent Sonja played a crucial role in advancing the development of the Soviet atomic bomb, which was successfully tested in 1949. In addition to handling high-profile spies like Klaus Fuchs and Melita Norwood, Sonja was the GRU handler for an officer of the British Royal Air Force and a British specialist in submarine radar, among others. Fuchs was arrested toward the end of 1949, and in January 1950, he confessed to being a spy during his trial. The day before Fuchs's trial began, fearing exposure, Agent Sonja left England. In March 1950, after 2 decades away from her birth city, she returned to Berlin. Fuchs finally identified her as his Soviet contact in November 1950. Ruth Werner passed away in Berlin on July 7, 2000 and is regarded by many as Stalin's greatest female spy. Madeleine Noor un-Nisa Inayat Khan, GC, also known as Nora Inayat Khan and Nora Baker, was a courageous British resistance agent in France during World War II. She served as the Special Operations Executive under the codename Madeleine. In November 1940, Noor joined the Women's Auxiliary Air Force and, as an aircraft woman second class, was trained as a wireless operator. Later, she was recruited to join the F section of the Special Operations Executive and was sent to Aylesbury in Buckinghamshire for special training as a wireless operator in occupied territory. From Aylesbury, Noor went on to Beaulieu for security training, which included a practice mission. The ultimate training exercise was a mock Gestapo interrogation, intended to give agents a taste of what might happen if they were captured, and to practice maintaining their cover story. Noor's superiors had mixed opinions about her suitability for secret warfare. Her training was incomplete due to the urgent need for trained WT operators in the field. Her childlike qualities, gentle manner, and lack of ruse greatly worried her instructors at SOE's training schools. But Vera Atkins, the intelligence officer for F section, insisted Noor's commitment was unquestioned, as confirmed by a training report. When the request for an agent came from Subtle, Vera saw Noor as a natural choice. Although Noor's final training in field security and encoding was cut short, Vera judged her ready to go. Noor's mission would be extremely dangerous. Her task was to maintain a link between the field circuit and London, sending and receiving messages about planned sabotage operations or where arms were needed for resistance fighters. Despite her perceived shortcomings, Noor's fluent French and her skill in wireless operations, along with a shortage of experienced agents, made her a valuable candidate for service in Nazi-occupied France. Starting on June 24, 1943, the Prosper network, which Noor had been sent to support as a radio operator, began to be dismantled by the Germans. Her stay in France had become so dangerous that her commander offered to have her flown home, but she insisted on staying, believing she was the only radio operator left in Paris. Noor Inayat Khan was betrayed by the Germans, possibly by René Gary, and on October 13, 1943, she was arrested and taken to the SD headquarters at 84 Avenue Foch in Paris for interrogation. During this time, she tried to escape twice. Hans Kiefer, the former head of the SD in Paris, testified after the war that she did not give the Gestapo any useful information and lied consistently. Although Noor refused to disclose her secret codes, the Germans used the information in her notebooks to send false messages, pretending to be her. As a result, 3 more agents sent to France were captured by the Germans at their parachute landing, including Madeleine d'Amermont, who was later executed. Sonia Olshanesky, a locally recruited SOE agent, learned of Noor's arrest and sent a message to London through her fiancé, Jacques Weil, warning HQ to be wary of any transmissions from Madeleine. But the message was ignored because they didn't know who Olshanesky was. Consequently, the Germans' transmissions from Noor's radio continued to be treated as real, leading to the unnecessary deaths of SOE agents, including Olshanesky herself, who was executed at the Natzweiler Struthof concentration camp. On November 25, 1943, Noor escaped from the SD headquarters with fellow SOE agent John Renshaw Starr and resistance leader Leon Fay, but they were recaptured nearby. During an air raid alert, their escape was discovered because regulations required a count of prisoners. After refusing to sign a declaration renouncing future escape attempts, Noor was taken to Germany on November 27, 1943, for safe custody. She was imprisoned at Pforzheim in solitary confinement as a Nacht- und Nebel prisoner, meaning she was to disappear without trace. For 10 months, she was kept in complete secrecy, shackled at her hands and feet. On September 12, 1944, Noor Inayat Khan was suddenly transferred to the Dachau concentration camp, along with her fellow agents, Yolande Beekman, Madeleine d'Amermont, and Eliane Plumen. At dawn the next morning, the 4 women were ordered to kneel with their heads facing a small mound of earth. They were executed one by one, shot through the back of the neck by the SS men. During the shooting, Noor and Yolande Beekman held hands, as did Madeleine d'Amermont and Eliane Plumen. For 3 of the women, the first shot was fatal, but for Noor, a second shot was needed, as she showed signs of life after the first. Noor's last word was reported to be liberté, meaning freedom. Agent 355. One of the most mysterious and unsolved cases in the history of America is that of Agent 355. The only direct reference to 355 in any of the Culper Ring's messages appears in a letter from Abraham Woodhull to General George Washington, where Woodhull describes her as one who hath been ever serviceable to this correspondence. Operating within British-controlled territory, Agent 355 gathered valuable intelligence on troop movements, supply routes, and strategic military plans. With discretion and resourcefulness, she transmitted vital information to her handlers, enabling General Washington to make well-informed decisions that often turned the tide of battle. While the true identity of Agent 355 remains a mystery, some details about her role are clear. The way the code is structured suggests she may have held some degree of social prominence. It's believed she resided in New York City and had interactions with Major John Andre and Benedict Arnold. One suggested candidate for Agent 355 is Anna Strong, a neighbor of Woodhull. Strong reportedly assisted the Culper Ring by signaling the location of Caleb Brewster, who disrupted British shipments in Long Island Sound from a secure location provided by Strong. Her method of communication was clever. She used her laundry as a signaling system, with a black petticoat indicating a message was ready for pickup, and the number of handkerchiefs indicating the pickup location. Caleb Brewster monitored these signals from Long Island Sound, ensuring smooth message delivery and indicating the retrieval point. Another theory proposes that Agent 355 could have been Robert Townsend's common-law wife. Stories suggest Townsend was romantically involved with Agent 355. John Burke and Andrea Meyer have presented a case for Agent 355's involvement in the spy ring, using circumstantial evidence linking her to Major John Andre and Benjamin Talmadge, potentially shielding Woodhull from suspicion of espionage. Other potential candidates for Agent 355 include Sarah Horton Townsend and Elizabeth Bergen. Some believe that Agent 355 may not have been an official member of the spy ring, but rather a woman with valuable information not formally connected to the group. The code used may have referred to a woman with information rather than an actual female agent. In 1780, when Benedict Arnold defected to the Loyalists, the then-pregnant Agent 355 was arrested. She was held on HMS Jersey, a prison ship, where she may have given birth to a boy named Robert Townsend Jr. However, historian Alexander Rose disputes this account, stating that women were not typically kept on prison ships, and there is no record of a birth occurring there. The theory that Agent 355 could have been Anna Strong is supported by the fact that Anna's husband, Sella Strong, was indeed imprisoned on HMS Jersey, and Anna reportedly brought him food. This connection may have led to the legend that Agent 355 was herself held on the prison ship. Bella of the Wych Elm. On April 18, 1943, 4 local boys, Robert Hart, Thomas Willits, Bob Farmer, and Fred Payne, were exploring and looking for birds' nests in Hagley Wood, part of Lord Cobham's estate near Wychbury Hill. While climbing a large wych elm tree, Farmer peered into a hollow trunk and made a startling discovery: a skull. Initially mistaking it for an animal skull, he realized it was human upon seeing the hair and teeth. Concerned about their presence on the land, the boys put the skull back and quietly left. However, upon returning home, Willits, the eldest, felt uneasy and decided to confide in his parents about what they had found. The police were informed and subsequently discovered an almost complete skeleton inside the tree trunk, along with a shoe, a gold wedding ring, and fragments of clothing. The skull was particularly significant as it still had hair and showed clear dental features, despite missing some teeth. Further investigation led to the discovery of a hand some distance away from the tree. The body was sent for forensic examination by James Webster, a Home Office pathologist based in Birmingham. He quickly determined that the deceased was a female who had been dead for at least 18 months, placing her time of death in or before October 1941. Webster also found a piece of taffeta in her mouth, indicating suffocation. Based on the size of the tree trunk, Webster deduced that the body must have been placed there shortly after the killing, while still warm, as it would not have fit once rigor mortis set in. Police gathered items found with the body to create an image of the woman's appearance. However, with numerous people reported missing during World War II, identifying her proved challenging. They compared the details with missing person reports from the region, but found no matches. They also reached out to local dentists because the dental work was distinctive. In a Radio 4 program that first aired on August 2014, Steve Punt suggested 2 possible victims. One report from 1944 by a Birmingham worker mentioned that a worker named Bella, who worked on Hagley Road, had disappeared about 3 years earlier. The name Bella, or Luabella, hinted that the graffiti writer might have known the victim's identity. Another possibility emerged from a statement made to police in 1953 by Una Mossop. She claimed that her ex-husband, Jack Mossop, had confessed to family members that he and a Dutchman named Van Ralt had placed the woman in the tree. Mossop and Van Ralt had met at the Littleton Arms, a pub in Hagley, and later that night, while the woman was intoxicated and passed out in their car, they decided to put her in a hollow tree in the woods. They hoped she would wake up the next morning, frightened by her surroundings, and realize her mistake. Jack Mossop was later confined to a mental hospital in Stafford due to recurring dreams of a woman staring at him from a tree. Unfortunately, he passed away in the hospital before the body in the wych elm was discovered. However, the credibility of this explanation is questioned because Una Mossop did not come forward with this information until more than 10 years after Jack Mossop's death. Another theory comes from a declassified MI5 file about Joseph Jacobs, the last man to be executed in the Tower of London on August 15, 1941. Jacobs, an Abwehr agent, parachuted into Cambridgeshire in 1941, but broke his ankle upon landing and was quickly apprehended by the Home Guard. Among his possessions was a photo purportedly of his lover, a German cabaret singer and actress named Clara Bauerl. Jacobs claimed that she was being trained as a spy and might have been sent to England after him. However, there is no evidence supporting that Clara Bauerle was parachuted into England, and witnesses described her as around 6 feet tall, whereas Bella was only 5 feet tall. It was later confirmed that Clara Bauerle died in Berlin on December 16, 1942. In 1953, another theory arose, suggesting that the victim was a Dutch woman named Clarabella Dronkers, allegedly killed by a German spy ring consisting of a British officer, a Dutchman, and a music hall artist for knowing too much. However, available records and evidence did not substantiate this story. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.